This is Immuno Africa, a podcast dedicated to spotlighting African immunology research.
We not only recruit participants and we collect samples, and these samples are shipped to the sponsor who run analysis. So I can say that I've been involved in all these steps included in the development of the vaccine. So from the field, in the lab.
Welcome to the Immunology in Africa podcast. I am your host, Welt Okete. If it's your first time here, kindly support our work by subscribing to this podcast and turning on notifications to keep up with new episodes. We're currently on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, and other streaming platforms. In this episode, I am joined by lab manager and clinical trial researcher Ousmane Traoré, whose efforts immensely contributed to the approval of the current malaria vaccines. Dr. Traoré talks about his roles as a field worker and laboratory scientist at the Clinical Research Unit of Nanoro, Burkina Faso, highlighting the indispensable role of community engagement in combating vaccine hesitancy and boosting vaccinations.
My name is Dr. Ousmane Traoré, and I am a biologist, researcher at the Clinical Research Unit of Nanoro. I have dedicated my academic and professional life to the field of malaria research, particularly focusing on immunology. My journey began with a passion for understanding infectious disease and the impact on vulnerable population, particularly pregnant women and children under 5 years. Currently, I serve as a lab manager at the Clinical Research of Nanoro in Burkina Faso, overseeing malaria vaccine trials and conducting research on immunology and particular immune responses to malaria. My interest in malaria research stem from my witnessing of several aspects. So starting by the devastating effects of a disease on communities, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. Basically, I started doing science when I was performing my master degree. I've been granted by the ECOWAS grant to run some lab activities. When I reach a center called CNRST, it is a center based in the second town of Burkina Faso, call it Bobo-Dioulasso. It is an international center. So when I reached there, they proposed me a topic. It was a very complex topic. So one of the first researchers who worked at CNRST were working on the development of a product that is used in immunoenzymatic research. Call it generally ELISA. So there is a product there which is very expensive. So the boss tried in year 1982 to run this analysis to develop a strategy or a proposal that could help him producing this antiserum that is used in ELISA test. So it was difficult for him to do that. And what happened later, in year 2000 and I can say in 17, that I have been recruited, I've been granted. And when I was there, they proposed me this complicated topic. It was actually very difficult because the machine that he was using were stopped since years 1982. Can you imagine how I struggled to not only to clean the equipment, and it was actually very a vetused one, so a very it, this kind of equipment was not actually used in any center in Burkina Faso, but there is there was at that time a very evolved, more, I can say, more developed. So call it, he was using FPLC, that HPLC, and at that time, HPLC was not actually the one people were using. So I went to another center to see the last version, which is called FPLC. I looked at FPLC and I came back to CRDES, and it was possible to make HPLC working again. So I ran the analysis. So the work was very interesting. It was a strategy to develop this anti-serum, as I said. So basically um, uh, I drafted my first proposal, and the strategy was to purify antibody from immunized um, cattle infected by trypanosomiasis. So I purified antibodies there that I injected in poultry, and I collect the eggs, and in the yolk of the egg, I collected the conjugated antibody. That is called IgY, yolk immunoglobulin. So it was possible to label, and I ran my analysis against the commercial product, and it was wow. It was very surprising, and I got chance to meet this professor. It was a professor from Germany. Once he came in Burkina for a meeting, and when he saw his equipment functioning, he asked who actually made this equipment functioning currently. They showed me, and yeah, I've been congratulated, and then I said that I find my way, and I went through research, and later I've been recruited at the clinical research of Nanoro as field worker. I worked 2 years as field worker. We were having authorization to enter in the lab. So 2 years later, the boss heard that he has in his team a guy who has a master's degree, and he did immunology. That's my story. I'm actually happy to be part of the core team at the clinical research of Nanoro. So when uh, I've been integrated as a member of core team, I worked as a a research assistant, and later I coordinated a clinical research for 7 years on the RTSS vaccine.
So I think we'll proceed further in the conversation and talk about what your work on these malaria vaccines were like, contributing towards the clinical trials and then getting them approved, and some of the findings you made that contributed to the approval of these vaccines for children.
My contribution in malaria vaccine development started in year 2009. I started first as field worker. Later, I was involved in the sample management. So from the field, I moved to the lab. During this period, I was collecting samples that were analyzed were analyzed so that we could attain our goals. That was the testing of the efficacy of malaria vaccine. So I can say that generally this kind of research are done in a sort of consortium. So you have the sponsor. So the sponsor provide funding, and on field, we not only recruit participants, and we collect samples, and these samples are shipped to the sponsor, who run analysis. So I can say that I've been involved in all these in all the steps included in the development of the vaccine. So from the field, in the lab, and after we start engaging on what can be done as scientists, yeah, from Africa. Yeah, so that leads currently international scientific community to know the level, the cutoff of antibody that is necessary when we talk about protection. I've contributed to that, and also I contributed as immunologist in designing the second generation of RTSS vaccine, which has been recommended in October, the last October of year 2023, as the second malaria vaccine. So I contributed at each step, and still working on that.
I think something struck me while you were speaking when you mentioned shipping of the samples collected to the consortium that provides funding for them to run analysis. So I'm just wondering where the analysis for the vaccines, or like the effectiveness, were they all done outside of Africa or outside Burkina Faso? Or maybe you could just provide more context to what you meant by shipping samples and then getting the funding agencies to run some analysis on those samples.
Yeah, this is actually the main problem in Africa. since I can say the last decade, we African researchers, we started now asking when we are collaborating with sponsors coming from Europe or Western countries, yeah, with the strategies, to be involved from the beginning to the end. So that is to say, even the development of the proposal, we involved now. And each copy of sample that are sent to them, we have also a sample stored on site so that we can proceed to the building of our capacity also. We need to be at the same level as them. It is not a matter of lack of knowledge, but it is a lack of means. It's a lack of technology. As you may know, African countries really, we need to have our government engaged in the financing our research. That is a way of, I can say, we are running behind our freedom as a researcher. Yeah. Generally, when we met in conferences, when we work together, you can see it's not they have more I don't want to say intelligent, but we are in the same equal footing when we are talking about science, but we don't have actually equipment to run things. It is very, very clear that today, as you are a biochemist, you know, you may know that apart from South Africa, there is no country in Africa who can develop a vaccine using equipment in place. Yeah, so this is actually the difficulty that African researchers are facing. Yeah. So, but be confident that we know every product that is entering in our countries and all the samples that are sent are shipped to sponsors. We have eyes on that, and regulatory documents are signed. The first step of clinical trial is the informed consent, which is a legal document that can be used in the way of law. So we prepared on that. Yeah. Okay. Over.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot for providing some background and providing more details about that question, because I was just interested in it when you mentioned that samples were being shipped out, and I think from the explanation you provided, so I believe the context now is more of because you've been in the field for a long time. When you started out, there were certain things that were not working as they should be. Because you mentioned that now compared to before, that you now try to have your own copies of the samples that are shipped out, and then there are also better structures for monitoring and better structures for ensuring that African scientists are involved in the entire process from the conception to the final step of the research project. Yeah. So that means for some of these clinical trials that are conducted, the analysis for the samples are
typically done? I don't know if this is unique to malaria vaccines, of course, but maybe for clinical trials, it is typical for the samples to be shipped abroad, for the experiments to be gone abroad, and then we get the results back to Africa. Is that the case?
Yeah. For the majority of cases. Yeah.
Okay. So, of course, I know the Africa CDC and the AU, they are trying now to strengthen Africa's capacity for manufacturing vaccines and medicines and some drugs locally. But I'm just thinking about carrying out these tests. So, are there like plans, maybe partnership with these funders such that they, instead of having to ship samples, because I know even shipping samples also costs a lot of money, and getting the results back, because these samples come from our populations, are there like plans or potential partnerships with them to ensure that there are facilities on ground in the countries to run these experiments locally? I know you mentioned African government, but I'm also thinking about the funding agencies who run these project, this big clinical trial project. So yeah, so are there any plans of that nature?
Yes, actually, you have several networks that are active in Africa currently. They are also trying to set up some reference labs. So it is a consortium of African researchers, such as the MIM conference we are attending, for example, which is also a network. You have some networks very well known in Africa, Marcad. You have Wanetam. You have WACBIP. So all those starting by W are from West Africa. Yeah, so these networks are trying now to gather the knowledge and the means to set up labs where we will analyze our samples and being master of all the process. So this was actually a problem at the if we go back 20 years ago, but currently things are changing. The paradigm is changing, and we now organize, and we working together. Even it is difficult, because the particular thing also that we may know, we may have in our mind, is that budget funding.
Okay. Yeah.
It's still coming from outside.
Yeah, sadly.
So that is why African CDC is now working with African Union to have sufficiently budget so that we can fund our research that we are going to run for us. So this is actually a sort of fight also against toward our freedom as researcher. Yeah, it is something like this is a sort of it is a need. It is a need. It is a need for we African to gather our knowledge, our skills, and work actually, yeah, on our samples without sending outside. I would like to mention something.
Yeah.
Since the last decade, at each moment, we're writing the agreements of the the project, even if the funding comes from Europe, we always state clearly that one of our students will follow the management of the samples from our countries to Western countries. So it is not something we will send samples and we will stay waiting for results. They can, people can transform, can create data currently with the AI, artificial intelligence. So that, everything possible. Okay, over.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the good news from what you said, even though there are lots of will I say a lot of negative components to it, is that we are making progress now. Like, it's actually commendable and exciting that we're making progress. That we've identified challenges as scientists in the continent, and then we are saying this is how we want things to be going forward. And then I mentioned earlier, and of course you also reiterated that the Africa CDC, the AU, and also putting heads together to ensure that we are able to strengthen local capacity. Because going back to what you said earlier on, that we have the, will I say, the mental capacity, we have the ideas, we have all of the, individual, the human resource, but we do not have the means to put all of those ideas and bring all of those thoughts we have to fruition. So, of course, we have challenges, but we're making progress in the context, with regards tackling those challenges. Yeah. So I think would you come back to our conversation about malaria vaccines? We already delving so much into research capacity and in the continents. Yeah. So scientists have been working on these vaccines for several decades. And we know with COVID advancement in technology, COVID vaccines took just a couple of months for us to get the first set of vaccines. But malaria vaccines have been quite a tough nut to crack. So I would love you to just comment on, as someone who has been on the field and someone who is working on some of these projects. So to just comment on why malaria vaccines took so long to develop, and what's the future like for the vaccines? Because even the current vaccines, they do not provide lifelong protection. If you check some of these recommendations from the World Health Organization, the UNICEF, they tell you when you take these vaccines, also make sure you're using your insecticide-treated nets. We are also taking all of these public health, kind of public health related measures to make sure you get the maximum benefit for the vaccine. So let's just talk about all of the challenges associated with getting these vaccines, and even now that the vaccines are available, what are some of the challenges that we still have?
Yeah, see that you are aware of these situation that occurred when COVID arrived, and it takes just months that the world obtained at least 5 vaccine against COVID. Oh, okay. So the main explanation of that immediately is there is a difference between viruses and parasites. Malaria is due to parasite, which is I can say 1,000 times the virus. So we have a lot of antigens against which the body have to face and to combat. Compared to the virus, it is a small it is really small, and it is easier, and its number of gene is known. The number of its genes are known also, and it is easy to develop. Try to compare the whole hand, compare it to the small finger. It's some virus is like the small finger. So you can see it is easy to catch, but when I will catch all my hand, yeah, it is a lot of efforts. Okay, so but the fact that the scientific community obtained quickly COVID vaccine helped the second generation of malaria vaccine to be recommended. Yeah, so we researchers, we ask question to WHO. Why wait for a long time, spending money, spending time for observing small change, and when it comes to have vaccine against COVID, it went fast. So there is no need to wait again. The second generation of malaria vaccine was at its phase 2, and we moved forward with phase 3, and we had the same, quite the same level of efficacy. So it was easier to defend this vaccine using the situation of COVID vaccine, you can see. So it's also, yeah, having COVID vaccine quickly was actually the motivator, yeah, to have a second malaria vaccine. Okay, so apart from these challenges, now we have two vaccines, RTSS and R21. It's been declared as protecting around 77%, and RTSS protect less than R21. Okay. So this is now a matter of yeah, it will comes out that scientific community provided the product. WHO starts distributing RTSS. R21 is coming. So we still have some observation of the two, a step of the two vaccine, and there is a phase called the pharmacovigilance phase. So since RTSS has been accepted and is currently distributed in some countries, for example, my country received 1,000 doses. So, and we start implementing at large scale of this vaccine. So R21 is also coming. I don't know. Even today, I was attending to a panel talking about these vaccines, these two vaccines. So it depends on the donors. It will depend on the donors. So if the donor decide to provide, yeah, it's look like the different vaccines that we got against COVID. You can see, for example, in your country, you receive something from BioNTech, some receive from Germany, others from US. Yeah, so it will be something like this. Both will work. And the important challenge is to know that malaria vaccine cannot act alone due to the multiplicity of antigen, the antigenic multiplicity. So it is too large. You have a lot of antigens and only a small piece that is called CSP. It is a circumsporozoid. It is against this portion that vaccine has been, the current vaccine have been developed. So you will see decline of the vaccine efficacy. So that is why I said at the beginning that we still have work to do on these vaccines to observe what will happen and what we can improve on vaccines. So before that, the strategies in place must be completed by vaccine that we currently obtain. So the vaccine will not work alone. So reducing mosquito bites, using correctly drugs, the available drugs, diagnosing, getting a diagnosis quickly, uptaking anti-malaria drugs correctly, sleeping under mosquito net, and vaccinating kids who are the most targeted by malaria.
So I just wanted to talk about some of what are like the unique challenges that you encountered having to engage communities and talk to them about vaccines. Maybe also relating to your experience with fieldwork and even now as a clinical trial researcher. So what are some challenges that you encounter and how do you try to navigate them? Because the issue of vaccine hesitancy, vaccine misinformation is age long and it's not unique to Africa. So let's just talk about that shortly.
Yeah, my experience on community, I think it is still a problem it is not only from our country. Yeah, generally fake news. This is due to past events, somewhere people have seen practices when running clinical trials or when providing cares. So this is the main or the first fear that researchers has when doing when running their activity. So you have also the time spent at hospital level. So generally, you will see in rural areas, people really to engage in your activity, it's sometimes complicated. Our experience showed that if you didn't involve the community members at the beginning of your activity, and 80%, you have 80% chance to miss your goals. Okay, so also the effect of fake news. Sometimes it is difficult, for example, to collect placental samples. It is also sometimes complicated to vaccinate people, because we will think that, yeah, you are dispensing a product that is not known, it's come from abroad, and yeah, so things like this. And also you will have currently the democracy like that we have, you will see some leaders, yeah, due, for example, to conflictual relationship existing between two villages. If you start, for example, working in one village, you cannot get access to the second, and vice versa, which is something really complicated. If you are not smart to engage them, for example, a meeting, conveying all the community. So starting by the leaders, community leaders. So it's actually, this is actually one of our fear also. For example, having the authorization from the having the authorization doesn't mean that you can start your work. You will start meeting. You can spend at least 2 or 3 months meeting community leaders before having access to the population. So we actually, for example, my research center started working in the area in year 2008. From this 2000, from 2008 to the, we ran at least 40 clinical trials. So we are now experienced on in community engagement. So it is important to share, to keep sharing your research data with the community, so that people would not come with fake news and disturb the relationship that you established. This is actually the small experience that I have in community engagement. So during for example, to share your research data, you may organize maybe a sort of meeting, recreative activity. Yeah, we use, for example, theatrical things, yeah, to show how people, when they started coming at hospital, how they were thinking, and by the hand, how they are conveying other people to come. This is actually a very good thing. Yeah, it is very interesting, and it keep the confidence that the community has to your different activities. Yeah, it reinforce the relationship between you and the community.
Thanks a lot for sharing that. So we're already coming to a close of the chat, and I've enjoyed every bit of the conversation, and I want to say thank you again for sharing your work and your journey and your contributions towards the field of malaria and malaria immunology, malaria vaccination, malaria vaccines. So the last question I want to ask is that you should share something with our listeners, maybe it's with students or researchers or any listener at all, and tell them one thing that has helped you in your work, maybe a perspective that you hold that has really shaped and contributed to the kind of career you've been building, or maybe some techniques or approaches to life that has helped you, or, I don't know, just anything that you'd like to share.
Yeah, so I would like to emphasize that the importance of collaboration, perseverance, and innovation in tackling the complex health challenges like malaria. They're actually important for a researcher, particularly the perseverance. As you may know, I started as a field worker, and today I'm part of a core team. So sometimes when I discuss with our field workers, they are immediately motivated to add. Some of them went back to school. Yeah. They actually, they decide, for example, to stop working and go back to school. And also, based on my journey in malaria research, this journey actually taught me that collective effort driven by a shared commitment is necessary to outcome to actually transform the outcome that we can see currently. I encourage aspiring researchers, so young researchers, to remain curious, resilient, and compassionate in the pursuit of scientific excellence and social impact. Over.
Thank you so much. So you highlighted the importance of collaboration, perseverance, and innovation in pursuing research excellence. And then you are also advising researchers, up-and-coming researchers, to be curious, to be compassionate, and to be resilient in their approach to work, to research, to life. And yeah, I think it's a good way to wrap up this episode. And of course, I would like to say thank you again.
Thank you for listening to this episode on Immuno Africa. If you enjoyed it, please feel free to share it with your network. You will learn first about future episodes and get other immunology related updates by following Immuno Africa _ other Immunology in Africa podcast on social media. See you on the next episode. Bye.